Hey there, it's Ben Housel here, and here in this tutorial we're going to have a look at how we create a thumbnail inside Final Cut Pro 10 without using any external plugins. Now in this tutorial we're going to have a look at how we work with still images from our videos, how we cut out and make transparency in some of those videos using some of the masking tools, and then we'll look at how we layer up text and graphics in Final Cut Pro 10 in some really smart ways. So if you don't have Photoshop and you're looking for a way to create your YouTube thumbnails in a kind of creative way, then this tutorial will have a lot of tips and tricks for you that will be really useful. I want to thank the team at FX Factory for sponsoring this video, and if you like these kinds of tutorials and tutorial reviews, then please do hit the subscribe button and the notifications button. But let's dive right into it and have a look at how we create thumbnails for YouTube in Final Cut Pro 10. So let's dive right into Final Cut Pro here and have a look at how we create this thumbnail for YouTube in Final Cut Pro. So you can see in my layers here, kind of get a sense of what I've got here. I've got an original screenshot from my video. I've got a couple of custom shape layers and then a cutout image here. So we can, if we turn off the background, you can see I've kind of cut out parts of that image using some of the masking tools. And then we've got some titles and our Final Cut Pro logo there to kind of show what it is that we're creating a tutorial about. So let's dive in and have a look at how we set this up. So we'll go to File and New and Project. And we are setting up a basic 1080p project. The frame rate doesn't really matter because we're only going to export out a still image from here. So we'll just call this YouTube thumbnail demo, and 1080p is fine. I'm going to click OK. So now I've got a blank timeline here. So I'm going to jump back to one of my other edits to kind of grab some of the information that I need for this tutorial, in particular the kind of background image. So I'm going to come to my tutorial edit here for Cineflare screens, and we'll jump in and we're just going to kind of look for the video of me and we'll grab that whole thing. So I'm going to copy this into my new sequence, and then we'll paste that in there. So I just used Command C and Command V to paste that from one clip to another. So what we're looking for here is a kind of moment in the video where I'm smiling, perhaps, would be good, which I think actually is right back at the beginning here. So we've got this frame here, and we don't necessarily need to make a freeze frame, but it will stop our kind of video playing back when we're previewing it. So I'm going to do Alt and F, and that will make a 10-second freeze frame for me. And I'm going to delete that video now. So this is basically the image that we need. So I'm going to do Shift and Z just to kind of zoom to the entire timeline. So basically in terms of the layers that we're creating here, the first thing we need to do is kind of add the space on the right hand side where I like to drop my text. So I'm going to come up to my generators in the top here, and we're going to come and scroll down into the solids. And in the solids, we're looking for the custom option here. So in the custom option, we can select any color we want, and that will kind of work for what we need to do here. So for this background color here, before I select it, I'm actually going to come across to my effects and add onto here my mask. So I've got a search set up here. So I'm just going to clear that down at the bottom. So I've got a draw mask option here that I want to drag on. And basically with the draw mask, what I'm doing is zooming out and then setting up this angle that I have that basically allows me to have a space for type across on the right hand side. So it's super simple, nothing kind of fancy about that at all. So for this color, I'm going to leave that as black, and then I'm going to drag that up. And I'm going to just disable this topmost layer by tapping the V key for the moment, and I want to change the color of my background. So I'm going to click on my color box here, and I'm actually going to use the eyedropper for this one. So I'm going to grab my eyedropper, come up to this painting on the top left, and we'll grab that. That will be the kind of flash of color that pops across the middle here. So then I'm going to turn my black layer back on, and what I want to do with this black layer now, if I come to my video options, I want to make sure I've got my draw mask selected. So if you happen to have deselected it, just come back to your inspector on the top right. If you don't see your inspector, then just go to Window, Show in Workspace, and make sure the inspector is checked. And then once we select the draw mask, we can just move this across a little bit, and you can see it's going to give us that nice orange flash which matches nicely with the painting, and because we've copied that same layer, the angle is exactly the same, so we don't need to worry about trying to match the angle or anything like that. So the next step is to kind of move this image. So I want to basically grab the transform tool in the middle here and select this image in the background, and then position this kind of as I want most of my body to be visible around about here. So we're going to have the Final Cut logo down at the bottom left. I'm going to mask out here around the computer screen. So basically we're going to use the draw mask again to create some transparency there after we've duplicated this layer. And then we're going to add our text and type on top of that. So the next step here, once we've got this set up, I'm going to turn off the transform tool. I'm going to select my layer in the background here and drag it up. So if I just hold the Alt key, I can drag it all the way up. And basically now from around about here all the way to the right, I want to kind of cut out this area of the image. So I'm going to hide a couple things here. So we will hide my information across on the left, and I'm going to go to 300%. So when you zoomed in on your Final Cut Pro project, you'll see this little box on the right with a red box inside it, and that's basically allowing us to kind of drag and move around our image here. So I'm going to go to 300%. I want to be really super zoomed in on that shoulder. I'm just going to move this around, so I'm just dragging that little red box, and I'm going to drag a draw mask onto here. So now with the draw mask here, you can see I've got my pen tool. I can basically click dot to dot around the edge of my shoulder here, and I like this. It kind of allows me to keep the design of my thumbnails simple, but also kind of have a couple of different layers in there to add a little bit of depth. And I basically have a format for my thumbnails that's consistent between different videos, so hopefully it's recognizable when people find them or see them on YouTube. But basically we're gonna just keep going dot to dot all the way around here until we kind of find the table here. And then once we found this spot, we've basically grabbed most of what we need to cut out. So I'm going to go back to 25%, and now I can just come outside and then come back to the beginning here, and basically you can see now we've kind of cut out that area. So we have a little bit of an issue here on the right hand side, and basically the way that we're going to fix that is by using the color correction tools here. So I want to fade this to black across to the right. So there's a kind of neat way of doing this. Basically I will come to my exposure under my color correction, and now if I drop down my levels kind of all the way, I can now grab a shape mask from my color board, add a shape mask, and basically it's going to allow me to restrict that color adjustment to a certain part of the image. So I'm going to pull this across to the right here, and then this is the fade, so this space between the two red circles. So if I grab the outer circle and just kind of drag it out, you can see we get this kind of nice fade from black to a lighter color there. And we can also kind of modify how much this is fading out as well. So how quick that fade is by modifying these different kind of parts of the exposure. So how the darks, midtones, and then lighter parts of the image are actually kind of fading out. So I'm kind of quite happy with that. So you can see without the color board, we just have that hard edge, and then with the color board turned on and our shape mask, we can kind of fade it across the right and kind of give this nice effect. So I'm going to deselect that now, and we will come back to the beginning of our clip here, and I'm going to hold down Control and tap T now to add the default text layer. So on my timeline, I'm just going to do Shift and Z so I can see the entire timeline. It doesn't really matter where I am on the timeline, but now I'm going to move my type. You want to make sure you don't have the transform tool selected, otherwise when you move your type it will do something a little bit different. You want to make sure the transform tool is off, and then with your type selected we can move the actual type box itself rather than moving the whole frame of the video. It does make a difference and can cause some issues if you do it the other way. So we're going to call this FCPX Oh, we're going to do all caps, FCPX, and then we'll type in create a thumbnail using Final Cut. So for this text, I'm going to use the 2D styles. I'm going to go straight for the bold option here, and then we'll position this across to the right. Okay, let's have Final Cut Pro at the end there. So the first line, this FCPX, I want to be nice and big. So I want to see kind of all of my text options down here. So if I double click up at the top of my inspector here where the title is, then basically it will make that vertically taller, and I can hide my effects there as well. So I'm going to select this line by line and just increase this so that's nice and big. And then we'll grab create a thumbnail. And before I do this, I'm just going to set this to justify all so that everything is kind of justified to a block. And basically this block is kind of mapping to the width of the longest line. So I'm going to just shorten this by making Final Cut Pro a bit smaller, and that looks about right. So we're going to juggle the size of these lines of text. And the next step after this is one that I use a lot in Final Cut Pro, in Photoshop, and basically it allows us, let's change this to width. Okay. So if I select FCPX and change the line spacing here, it's going to drag up the next line. So if I put my cursor in each line, I can change the line spacing and pull the next line back up towards it. So we can get this nice kind of text block. Okay. So once that's there, you can see we're close to setting this up. I am going to change the color of FCPX. So if I scroll down here to my face, you can see I've got my color options. So I've got a yellow that I'm going to use here. And then I'm going to turn on down here also my drop shadow, which is just going to help my text to pop out a little bit. And at this point, you may want to tweak where your color adjustment is for this layer. So basically in my masks here, I might want to come to my shape mask, which I can do in the inspector, and just move this up or down or across just so that there's enough shadow underneath the text so that everything is kind of visible and legible at the sort of thumbnail size. So that looks pretty good. So create a thumbnail with Final Cut Pro, and then we're going to add the logo across here on the left. So to get the logo for Final Cut Pro, if we go to our Finder in our Applications folder, then basically within your Final Cut Pro app is the logo that you need. So if I just type in Final Cut Pro here, and I'm going to make this search for only applications in the Applications folder. So if I right click here and go to Show Package Contents, then once I'm inside my package, I can search for one of two things. One would be PNG, and one would be logo. And you can see here I've got a PNG of my Final Cut Pro logo here. I could also search for ICNS, which will give me the Final Cut Pro icon file, which actually has a few different files within it. So if I right click here and go to Open with Preview, you can see I've also got my Photoshop ICNS file open there as well. So you can search for different kind of applications files. And basically in here we have a series of varying resolutions. You can see once I get down to the smaller file size of Final Cut Pro kind of logo size. So we want to grab the number 1 logo, which is really big. That's kind of what we want. And if we select that and then go to File, Export, it's just going to export out the selected page, and we'll save this out as a PNG. It's going to keep the transparency, and so I'll call this Final Cut logo. Save that to the desktop. And now if we jump back into Final Cut Pro and bring up the desktop here, then you can see I've got my Final Cut logo, which is the one I just created, and I can drag that onto my timeline. So then we have a super high quality version of the Final Cut Pro 10 logo, and we can scale it down, position it across to the bottom left, And then if we want to as well, we could also add in from our video effects a drop shadow. So I just searched for drop there, which brings up the drop shadow effect, and just add a little drop shadow below our logo there as well. So I'm going to click done and deselect that. And so now you can see we're getting close to the way that I normally have my Final Cut Pro thumbnails set up. So there's a few nice techniques in there. One last thing we'll have a look at. So I'm going to hide a couple of these things. We will double click here and just minimize the text box and use Shift and Z so we can see the whole timeline here. So you can see this stack of layers that we have here. If I come back to the beginning, deselect everything, then I'm going to do Control and T and add another title in here. And in this title, I'm just going to go to Help, and if we type in here emoji, we'll get up, or just emo, we'll get the emojis and symbols panel up, which will allow us to kind of select different emojis and stuff that we might want to add into our YouTube thumbnail. So basically for this one, I'm going to add on this TV screen, so I can basically drag this up here. I'll delete that. I can close this window down now. And so now I've got a little TV screen there. We'll double click on this panel on the right again, and we'll just increase the size of that. That's kind of nice and big. And then we can move this up. Let's see if we can get that on the shelf there. So we'll have a little TV on the shelf. Okay. So we can add other logos, smiley faces, that type of thing. We're just going to leave it at this little TV on the top left there. One thing I guess we could do, it's a YouTube thumbnail, is we could add in another text layer. So Control and T again. And if we select this new layer, I'm going to change the font here that I'm using to a font called Font Awesome. And if I come to my web browser here, I have the Font Awesome kind of cheat sheet up here. This is a newer version of Font Awesome, so when I copy the YouTube logo from here, so Command and C with that selected, and paste it in here, it actually comes up with the words YouTube rather than the actual kind of play bar itself. So I'm just going to put this up in my TV here. The Font Awesome font has a kind of lot of neat options in there as well. So I'm just going to deselect everything now, and basically the next step is to export out our JPEG or PNG. So this is 1920 by 1080, so the quality is great for uploading to YouTube. I'm going to click the share button across on the right, go to Save Current Frame. If you don't see that option there, then just go to Add Destination. And once we're in Add Destination, we can select the Save Current Frame option and kind of drag it across to here as well. So we have it available. We'll go to Save Current Frame, and we've got all of our options there. So at the moment, this is a PNG image. I'm going to save it as a JPEG image, and everything there is fine. It's still 1920 by 1080, which is a great size for your YouTube thumbnail. And also if you're kind of sharing it on Facebook and stuff like that, then you can use the thumbnail there as well. So we'll press next, and I will save this as YouTube thumbnail demo, thumbnail, export, and I like to revision things, so R01 will be my first revision of this in case I come back and make any changes, and then we'll save that there. So that's how to make a YouTube thumbnail in Final Cut Pro. So if on YouTube we come to my videos here, we'll come to this video and hit edit. Then basically, once we're in the edit panel for our video in YouTube Studio, we can click on the thumbnail, which is this left-hand button here. And if we click the drop-down menu, select change, then it will allow us to upload that new thumbnail. So we can navigate to the folder, select the new thumbnail, and then upload that to YouTube. I'm not going to do that here because the thumbnail has nothing to do with this video. And so yeah, basically that is how to create your thumbnail for YouTube and then upload it to YouTube. And we can do that all in Final Cut Pro 10. We don't need to use an application like Photoshop for creating those images. We can design them in Final Cut Pro. And any techniques that you use in Final Cut Pro, obviously color correction, effects that you're adding and that type of thing, you'll be able to use in your thumbnails as well. So hopefully that's been helpful. I've had this question a few times, and this is kind of upon request. So if you do have any comments, then please leave them below. But otherwise, I look forward to seeing you on the next tutorial.